Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski. How are you this evening? And I have with me Wiki Dave. How you doing, Wiki Dave?
I'm doing all right this afternoon. So just hi this afternoon to everyone in a different time zone, because maybe your evening, my afternoon. So got to cover all the bases.
Hey, that's all right. It's all part of our worldwide coverage here on the Mantic Universe podcast. And so, well, we are back at you with some more fabulous lore action. So what do we have on the docket tonight?
Yeah, so we're going to go deep lore, and this is the first time we're going to do a faction-based one. So this is all going to be about the Herd. It's one of the more underappreciated factions, and we're just basically going to talk about the Herd, what we know about it. There's not a lot of meat there, but that's what partly the fun of this is. We can talk about what we actually do know and potentially what it can be. So... the Herd. That's going to be fun.
The Herd is the word. Absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. So do we want to start off with our contest winner?
Yeah. So what we're going to do, probably going forward, until me and Mark get sick of doing these, we'll probably start with a news section. So the first off, we'll talk about the competition that we did last law episode when we talked about the Celestians. We asked everyone if you wanted a book, The Rise of the Celestians, you want to enter the contest, is to post on our YouTube channel who your favorite Celestian is. Now, thank you for all those that did enter, which is only 2, but still, it was 2. Now, out of the 2 entries, I was intending to send a book to both of them, because that was going to be the little surprise. But it turns out one of them we had to disqualify. Now, one of the entries that we disqualified was from CRT82. And they said their favorite Celestian is Oscar. He's cool. Now, the problem with that is Oscar lives on Sesame Street.
And he's grouchy.
And he's grouchy, or he works at a paper company. Depends on which Oscar you're referring to. But so that was disqualified. And at first you're like, that's rather harsh, Dave. And then I found out later it was actually Chris. It was actually Chris. That was Chris's username, and Chris already is part of MUP, so he doesn't get any free book that I'm paying for. So
he should know better, Oscar.
And he should know better. I mean, I didn't even know it was Chris until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, there he is. But he should know better of not saying Oscar as well, because Oscar is a grouch and he lives on Sesame Street, and he's not a Celestian. Well, he could be, but from my knowledge, he isn't. But the actual winner is Adrian Scott 4288. And he basically said, thanks for directing me to your YouTube channel, though I hope to see some more recent episodes here soon, rather than just a back catalogue from 1 year ago. So yeah, at the moment we are just uploading all the old episodes of MUP onto the webpage, but YouTube. But eventually we will get up to date, and the idea is for us to start experimenting with different things. So yes, we'll keep the podcast going, but maybe we'll do a live unboxing. I'm actually planning a live unboxing of Halo that we could put on the YouTube. So I don't know why I keep saying website on YouTube. Or we could do some YouTube specials, some videos and some shorts. So we are starting to do a few more shorts there. So this is all about just getting up to date, getting a good feel of how we want to do the YouTube. But if any suggestions, just reach out. They also said, to answer your question from the podcast, as a bit of a dwarf fanatic, I have to say that Fulgera is my favorite. One thing I was wondering, though, I was once reading some of the old first edition, I think it was first edition, background, and there are rumors of High King Golok secretly worshipping Agrafil, so the wicked one of Fulgera. Do you recall anything like that in your own reading of the background? Personally, I hope it's true. I think it will suit the ruthless and authoritative nature of Golok pretty well. Now, I know the answer to this. I'm going to see if Mark does, though. Mark, do you know the answer, or whether there's any hints of High King Golok secretly worshipping Agrafil?
The question is yes.
Yes. What? When? Like, what's your evidence of that?
My evidence of that is I believe that is in Pride of the King.
Correct.
I can't tell you because I haven't read it all the way yet, but Yes, I believe it's in there.
You're 100% correct. And I had some back and forth with Adrian as well. And it turns out they just ordered actually Pride of the King as well. So they're going to have the answer to their own question. But yes, so the Pride of the King is actually the first book of what they call the War of Stone. It's a trilogy written by Ben Stoddard. And that's going to probably dive really into all that. It's why the joke about whether dwarfs are good or evil now keep coming up, because of Golok kind of shifting his allegiance a little bit. But the Pride of the King definitely hints that he is swayed. Now, we do know based off other narrative that the only difference between an abyssal dwarf and a dwarf is really a cosmetic thing. But we haven't really gotten confirmation of whether the Shining Ones have an influence on whether they have the ability of bringing out the evil side of a dwarf a lot more. So like a wicked one can bring out the abyssal side of a dwarf. So that is what makes them abyssal. But we also know there are characters even from first edition that have the ability of doing the reverse of making abyssal dwarf a normal dwarf again. I think it was there's a character there. I always call him the happy dwarf. I think he was called Z something. I'll try and find what his name is while I'm talking about this. But yeah, the difference between an abyssal dwarf and a dwarf is just a cosmetic how they look thing. It's the line is very, very small. I can't remember the guy's name. I remember it was in first edition. All right, in Kings and Legends. Yeah, it was in Kings and Legends. I'm slowly finding this. I'm on the wiki right now. Jizik Gearland. So basically he found a staff and he started a commune as well at the end of his lore. But basically he found a staff called the Staff of Loon, and he has the ability to essentially like suck the abyssal out of somebody and make them back into a dwarf. So it feels like it's something that does come, like a dwarf is a little bit more evil. It does change a little bit of the biology, but they also have the ability to do the reverse. So I've got a feeling that the abyssal, every dwarf has like a meter of like abyssal and normal, and it really comes down to like how much is actually stronger is what kind of dwarf they end up becoming. So that's my theory anyway. What about you, Mark?
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I believe that a lot of it is the abyssal dwarfs because they're so close to the abyss. With the it enhances their greed and it enhances all of the bad parts of them. They get the whispers of the influence and stuff like that, and it just makes them, go mean. And they, it brings out their darker side. So it's almost like when the Celestians split. You've got the good dwarf and you got the bad side. So, that's the bad side that's by the abyss, and then. So now they're working on Golok, which to me, the Imperial dwarfs, more so when we first started and we only had one flavor of dwarf, they were good, but now, and Golok was a bit of an a-hole back then. So, but now they're playing more into that. And then the free dwarfs are breaking free of that. And for me, I get a Star Wars vibe out of that. So, I've got the Imperial dwarves. So and then you've got the free dwarfs, and they're escaping the evil guy, and
it does feel like free dwarfs should be the good side. Dwarfs should be neutral, just like all the other noble races. Oh, no, actually, elves are always good. But noble races in the terms of Panathor is before the Celestians came around and started messing up the world. There's pretty much were only three races. There was human, dwarfs, and elves. And so we've already got kings and men, which are neutral. And then you've got Basileans, which are good, brackets. And then the evil was kind of like the Vanagar, whatever.
Varangar, I say.
Yeah, so but the dwarves we haven't really got that kind of side. We've got two good dwarf factions, so free dwarfs and dwarfs, and then you got the abyssal dwarfs. So I think dwarfs should like the actual faction of the dwarfs. Free dwarfs keep in the good side, but maybe slide the dwarfs alignment to more of a neutral faction of them being a little bit more confrontational, which I feel like based off how the lore is, they are more neutral than pure good. I guess it's now just a question of why Golok is switching sides, because he already is the High King. He already is ruling all the dwarfs and pretty much the high dwarfs. So not the High Dwarfs, so the Free Dwarfs are pretty much under his thumb as they are. They don't have any lands to run to. So it'd be interesting to see what was missing from that. Did he just want to rule all the dwarfs, which is what is kind of hinted at? But I mean, what to what end? Because he knows the Abyssal Dwarfs are kind of ruled by the Wicked Ones anyway. So it'd be interesting to see, like, why did he side with them just to be ruled? So it'd be interesting to see how that story goes.
Well, if you think about it, he's the king. Maybe, some kind of artifact or something came from a battle that, some Abyssal Dwarfs or something like that, and something came in contact with him, or he kept an artifact that he thought was really cool, and, it's just his proximity to this evil gem or staff or, war relic or something,
Yeah, I guess it's a question of whether it's a thing he wants or a thing he's been forced to do. So I guess that's where it is now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can get subjected to some kind of evil influence because you all of a sudden become susceptible to it. You know, so
it could be that. And there's so many questions, and that's why.
That's why we love the lore.
Exactly. I would say we want these answers, and if you're thinking, how can I help get those answers? Pride of the King. Get Pride of the King. Show Mantic. Show Wintersa that we want more of these stories. Best way to get these stories, the second part of the trilogy out, and just talk about your love on it. Go to the Facebook pages, just talk about it, because you'll be surprised of how much just 10, 15 sales can do of just boosting it out there.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. So speaking of novels.
Yeah, speaking of novels, so part of the news section, I've managed to get some inside knowledge from Wintersa from Brandon. So thank you, Brandon, if you are listening to this, of the next 4 books that are coming up and kind of where the status are with them. So first one is, hopefully most people know about this, is Through Thick and Thin, and that is the sequel to Pious, that's it, Pious, written by Mark Barber. So it's a sequel to the book, probably one of the first sequels we really got. I mean, Mark wrote the original sequels that we've got. So that was from Steps of Deliverance, and then that split off to Hero, Fallen, and
Faith Aligned. Faith Aligned.
Yeah, Faith Aligned. That's right, because it kind of was like the 2 sequels came out of that.
Right.
So this is the second time we actually got a sequel, but this is an Armada book, really. I consider this as an Armada book. It is in the world of Panathor, which is this interconnected universe we're all talking about. So we are getting a sequel, and we're getting a character that's only been seen on the table, and which is really exciting because we never really get that crossover. Is Timok, so Tmork. And that's in the Empire of Dust. That's actually a captain you can get in the Armada game for Empire of Dust. So that is exciting to see that personality come to life. What does that personality look like? And also we're going to be getting Emperor of the Dust lore, which is really cool, which is really exciting. And we're also going to have salamanders chucked in there as well. And salamanders is something I want more salamander lore. I feel like they're a very ship-based kind of society. And so whenever we got more insight about how salamanders operate, I love that. So that's going to be really exciting. That is in the final stages. It's all finished and it's getting laid out. So we should be seeing the pre-order. You can currently pre-order from Wintersa. But all the other areas that you normally like Amazon, it's not there yet. But I would say go to Wintersa, pre-order it, show them that you want it. We'll most likely get it a little bit quicker. So the next one is Claws on the Plain. So that's one that we've been waiting for a while. That's Orcs and Kings of Men, which is exciting because we haven't got any Orcs yet. We don't know what their culture is like in Panathor. So this will be probably one of the first snapshots we got of what Orcs are like. What's their society like? How do they interact with each other? We know the savage, but are they like, we've got our own ideas. You got orcs in Lord of the Rings. You got orcs in Warhammer. How are Panathor orcs any different? How do we start making them stand out? So that's going to be a really exciting one because it's called Claws on Plain. I believe that is going through the edits at the moment, so we should be seeing that one soon. The next one, which I personally didn't actually know about. It's called Rage and Grace, and that's actually an Elf and Twilight Kin book, which is really exciting.
I have not heard about this one yet. This one's new.
So this one is written by Danny Graves. I'll quickly look at the message, which I'm hoping will be okay to check, and I'll check with Brandon after this. He said it is. Where is it? Rage and Grace is different sort of perspective. It focuses on elves and Twilight kin, but the two protagonists are a young girl and a forest shambler. So a walking tree. So it's about a girl and a walking tree, and it's on the darker side of things. So that'll be interesting to see how that's going to be. And to be honest, I'm excited for that one. That one seems a very interesting novel, especially from the Twilight kin kind of side of it.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah, you mentioned that's written by our very own Danny Graves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
very nice.
It's going to be really exciting. The last one is Cost of Power. Now, that's another one we've heard about. You can actually pre-order it on Wing Tassar as well, because it's been there for a while, and that's written by Tom Fern. And that's about the Ethereal Library, which is a great library that's in the Panathor universe, but we don't really know too much about it. You have seen screenshots of it, or images, art of it as well. So it's one of those big pieces of Panathor that we don't know a lot about, which will really exciting to just hear more about. Writing a book about a library, there's got to be something worth talking about. So it'd be interesting what the novel actually covers. And I've got a feeling it might be a history side of things. It might be just about magic in general, which would be cool to really dive into the limitations of magic in this world. But yeah, those are the 4 books that are coming up. So yeah, show your love, go to Wing Tassar, or just reach out and start talking about them. It'd be really exciting.
There you go. Now, is that the library where the big map is
I
being
believe
drawn
so, yes.
with the magic pen that we see in the art in the books?
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah. So that's something that's always been around for a while. It's one of those things that they're like, it's a cool thing, but no one's really sat down and said why it's cool kind of deal. So
it's interesting to see what kind of story. Well, I mean, there's going to be elves in there, but one would assume, yeah.
Yeah, you'd assume, and to be honest, if you're going to write a book about a library and spend the time of actually writing it down, the story has to be worth telling. So it'd be interesting to see, no one's going to say, I'm going to write a book about a library, and everyone's like, all right, what's it about? Like, well, why?
Chapter,
what's interesting about that? So,
yeah.
So I'm assuming it's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. But yeah, we'll see how it turns out, and it's going to be really cool.
Very, very cool.
Now, from me personally, I've been working on the new wiki. So when you hear this, it should be past the 13th of November, so my birthday, and that's when I was planning on launching it. So if you go to kingsofwarwiki.com, that is Wiki 2.0. We're going to be evolving that. We're going to be adding so much to that. Me and Mark were actually talking offline just about what potentially we could add in the future. Of the different, areas to make it more, a community-based kind of hub that you can just find anything you want. At the moment, my main focus is just making it, more usable on phones than the existing wiki, and that's a big one. Just get ads all the time. So the current Wiki 2.0, so kingsofwarwiki.com, no ads because it's off my own dime. So there is a donate button if you want to donate, just to make my wallet a little bit healthier in terms of compensating what I've already put into it. But the plan is that if there is enough donations, I will be making a Warpath one in the same kind of format, and a third wiki, which is for everything else Mantic. So we're talking about Halo, we're talking about The Walking Dead, talking about Worms, all those other games that, that knowledge has kind of been lost to time because there's not really any way of documenting it. So there's going to be those 3 wikis there, and hoping just to help the community and just have a really good safe place everyone can go and find information without being covered by ads. And fandom wikis are a bit hit and miss, and sounds of it, then they're not doing well financially. So it'd be interesting to get that off there, put it somewhere else so we don't lose all that information that the community have tried so hard to build. So, but the other 2 points I've discovered is Yathanar, who was the king of the elves in The Rise of Celestians. Now, I found out just building the wiki and doing some research is he actually dies in Rise of Celestians, but he's noted in Kings of War 2024 as being alive during the God War, which doesn't make sense because the Rise of Celestians happened before the God War. So I thought that was a continuity area there, but it wasn't, because I reached out to the Panathor Facebook group put the evidence on there, and it turns out that should be explained in the second novel of Rise of Celestians, because that is meant to be a trilogy. So we are going to find out why he said he was dead, but he wasn't in the book. So that was an interesting lore tidbit that I found out. I don't think anyone had pointed out before, but it's cool to know that that's actually been thought of. They've actually made that a point to mention that king after he died for a reason. So I think that's rather exciting.
There you go. So he's the Paul McCartney of Panathor.
Sounds that way, yeah. But we'll find out. But it also gives a good tidbit of how long elves live for, because Yennefer was alive before even the Celestians arrived in Panathor, and then the God War happened. Around about year 0 is when actually the war finished. So that's a good 2,000 years. So it also starts to tell us how long, because elves aren't immortal. They make a point to mention that elves have an end date. And they are born and they do all that kind of thing. So it's starting to give us a good idea of these kind of elves, how long they actually live for. So we know they at least can potentially live for over 1,000 years. So that helps, our own stories of how long elves live for. They go through kings I don't know, what's something goes people, you go through the kings like you guys go through presidents. You just swap them out so many times. In the recent lore that happens, but for a long period there, you did have the same king for a while. But yeah, and the other is that I found 2 shining ones that weren't documented. 3 new shining ones that weren't documented, and this is back in the Basilian Legacy supplement from first edition. So I found a shining one called Maria Tara, another one called Galena, and another one called Cisaprina Tara. Cisaprina Tara. Don't know if I pronounced that. And they're war gods as well. So it's all cool because there's so many shining ones that we don't know the names of, so many wicked ones we don't know the names of. So getting these little tidbits that were only mentioned a couple of times just helps, our own stories and help build that library up. So yeah, that's the news. So do you have anything there, Mark? Because I kind of
no, I'm really excited. I've had Claws on the Plane pre-ordered forever, so now I got to jump up on the Wing to Sar website and get some more stuff pre-ordered from them. So a good time to do that, and I will drop this hint on there. Is Wing to Sar usually runs a Black Friday sale, so that's coming. This is going to be dropping in the middle of November, so if you buzz over there, you can check that out and show some love to the guys over there at Wing to Sar Publishing for bringing us lore. So we love it.
And if you're looking for new books, my mother's birthday is also normally on around about the 26th of November, and she is a self-published writer as well, so you could buy her book. I personally have never read it because she has named a character after me, and there's a lot of dirty stuff that you never want your mum thinking about in that book, so I've never actually read it. So you can just try and look for her book. I don't know why she's named a character after me, but I've been afraid to read it. I do have them. I have them somewhere.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So am I brave enough to say link in the show notes?
It's called The Lad's Daughters, and she's made 7 of them, but I don't think it is a book that people that follow Mantic would read. It's about old Scottish times. I think it was in 1600s. And for some reason, there's some time travel in there. I don't know. I've never read it. All I know is that the 4th book, for some reason, jumps to 2007. But look out for The Lad's Daughters if you want a book to support someone that wants to become a writer. So. That was a side tangent. That's the ADHD for you. I did not plan to talk about any of that.
I can say it was not in the show notes, but hey, that doesn't mean anything here. So
no, we don't have show notes.
That's because we're professionals. So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, without a net tonight.
Yeah. So Mark, anything? Actually, another one. Sorry, Adrian, Scott out there. You probably was thinking, how can I redeem? Send me an email at kingsofwarwiki@gmail.com with your details, and I will get that book out to you. And if anyone wants to send an email or a question, just send it to kingsofwarwiki@gmail.com, and that's specifically for this show and for anything wiki related. So I can get back to you there. Just figured I'd mention that because Adrian's probably thinking I want my book. So
absolutely. All righty. Well, I think it's time to slide into the main part of the show here. We're going to be talking about the herd. So
correct. So we'll start off with the resources. So obviously this is our interpretation of the the herd faction, I should say. But ultimately everyone has their own opinion with it. So I'd say read up on it yourself. Best resource is that free PDF, the lore PDF you get from Mantic website. But the only other piece of lore that's probably good to consume is a short story called The Beast Within, and that was by Andrew McKinley, and that was in the Edge of the Abyss compilation. We got a compilation of a good about 10 different stories there, and there's also a good story in there that's connected to Broken Alliance. Actually, that's actually a prequel to the Broken Alliance. There's a lot of characters in there that do feature there, but The Beast Within, just to actually go back to your Star Wars analogy, the best way I could say it, it's like an apprentice-master kind of relationship, as in this person's learning off a master, and the herd are getting together because the orcs are invading the forest of Galahur. So that's where they all live, or the herd live. So the Edge of the Abyss is happening. The orcs are kind of invading the forest now, and the herd are kind of herding together. They're summoning together. They call it answering the call of the Longhorn. They're all getting together. So we find out that they work on a tribe kind of structure, that they have different tribes that are spread out. So it's not like one big city or one big herd. They all have their own individual kind of tribes. We also find out that they have it's a very respectful kind of culture of like, when we get together, we're all on the same page, that there is a bit of infighting, a bit of like love triangles, all that kind of stuff you get when you get together after a long time apart. But ultimately, everyone just kind of swarms together and fights the enemy in the name of the Green Lady. And that's all the herd is about, is the Green Lady. They may be saved by the father, which is the brave Chiron, but they fight for the Green Mother. So the Green Lady, I should say. So the main characters there is Malgar and Dragya, and they are satyrs or satyrs. Satyrs. So from your perspective, Mark, what's the difference between a faun and a satyr?
I don't know. They're different names, so I don't think much about fawns. I more got the satyrs in my mind when I'm reading the book. So they've got the hooves and the furry bottoms with the more human torsos on the top and the horns and.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mantic's never actually produced models, so we don't really have like an in-game difference here. But I looked it up, and also I'm a fan of mythology and Warhammer as well, and Warcraft, and so they've got their own interpretations there. So I mean, Warcraft. Satyrs are quite bigger. They're actually more like old night elves that are evolved into like into what satyrs are. In the actual fantasy lore, I mean, it's kind of like the difference between a Scot and an Irishman. I mean, they're practically the same, but it all depends on how much they drink. I mean, one of them is more passive, and another one is more aggressive. I'm not going to say which one's which, for safety reasons, but that's really their only differences. As I believe fawns are considered a little bit more tamer, a little bit more passive, and satyrs are more aggressive. And that's from a mythology point of view, that's really the only difference. And there's probably more nuance to that, but that's just an easy way of explaining really the difference. There is a lot of crossover. And probably in the Panathor world, there's probably a lot more of a difference. Maybe the horns are a different kind of makeup. Maybe they're a bit bigger, or maybe fawns and satyrs are different heights and so forth. But in the short story, it doesn't really elaborate more than that. And we don't really know because there's no actual models on the table. But again, potential of how can we make them a bit different, or making them stand out a little bit in the future. If we see models eventually, or we get additional lore, that's areas that we could see explored. But there's not really a difference. So when you say satyr, when you say faun, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just little cosmetic things. And they're probably technically two different races, but from cosmetically, you can't tell.
Yeah, you talk about models. This was my choice for the mysterious Third Army we were supposed to get this year. That is not happening. So
I think this is a missed opportunity that the herd aren't models yet. I mean, if we look into, when you think herd, what's the best comparison? Because a lot of Mantic armies are based off, like, I hate to say it, Warhammer armies, and this one's more Beastmen. So the Beastmen Fantasy Battle army, that's pretty much the closest thing, but they are so different that they really can't be grouped as the same thing. So we've got a few questions here. So we're going to tackle some questions as we go through it, so we're not repeating ourselves.
The Mantic Universe Podcast. So much universe, so little time.
So Chris Thomas, I think I've heard that name before. He said, where do they come from and who do they worship? So I'm going to put this on Mark first to try and explain, and then I'll basically say my interpretation if it's different.
Nothing like put me on the spot there, Dave.
No,
but
it's all right. If you don't know, it's fine. But
I know part of it. Yeah, it was during the. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm doing this without a net from memory.
Exactly.
So,
and if you can explain it to me without preparation, it means it will make sense to anybody else.
There you go. They were created, I believe. I don't know if it was after. It had to be after the split. And they're like the children of Brave Chiron and Garkan. I don't know. Is he the evil split of Brave Chiron?
No. So they were created during the God War. So after the mirror smashed and they split, you had Garkan, who was basically when the split happened, the Shining Ones had humans, dwarfs, and elves as their army, as the people that were helping them out. But the Wicked Ones didn't have all that. And the humans in the north was still Korgan, kind of inspired the Varagar.
Yeah, the Varagar, yeah.
Yeah, they were still old god kind of, loving. And so the Wicked Ones went, hey, we need our own army. We need to create our own races that are loyal to us. And so Garkan, who is the split of Belkan, so Garkan is the Wicked One of Belkan, he started experimenting. And his experiments resulted in the orcs and the goblins. And he, along with Dark Chiron, were doing these experiments. And the offcuts or the failed experiments were kind of thrown away to Dark Chiron. So Dark Chiron ended up getting the offcuts, you could say. There are a lot more experiments that have been mentioned in the past, like half orcs or hobgoblins. Or there was also Yurkin. There was another one. Now, that was back in the first edition. They haven't been heard since, but potentially they could be failed experiments. But when we're looking at centaurs, when we're looking at fawns, when we're looking at satyrs, those are failed experiments from the Wicked Ones. They have been chucked to Dark Chiron, and Dark Chiron kind of took it from there and made them to what they are now. So the reason why they look human is because what Garkan did is took all the noble races like dwarfs and humans and elves and kind of just messed them up genetically and just played God and tried to mess them up, added animals into it, added all these kind of things just to develop orcs. So when you look at orcs and goblins, you probably can think, that's probably dwarfs and humans, like a product of those two races. But all the fawns and satyrs and centaurs were probably humans mixed with other animals that were just failed experiments and they were chucked to the side. So basically Dark Chiron kind of took the offcuts, you could say, the failed experiments, and developed his own armies for those. And then essentially released them into the world the same way the orcs did and just caused them to kind of terrorize the world. And partly, and then once that happened, Brave Chiron saw this happening, and Chiron, as a Celestian, loved animals. You see that in Rise of Celestians. You see him, with the old dragons and kind of like interacting with that. He loves animals. So when the split, you can think about the evil side of that was enhanced, and then the good side of that was enhanced. The evil side of someone loving animals is creating your perfect kind of animal race or influence, and then on the other side you've got Brave Chiron who wants to save them, wants to save animals, and remember Dark Chiron also messed with the Trident realm races as well. So he was playing God with all these animals and creating all these brand new species basically and releasing to the world. And when they were released, they weren't called the herd. They were called the lost. And the lost were basically like orcs. They were just like, they were lost. They didn't have any guide. Orcs were more perfected when they were released, but the lost, or the races of the herd that didn't have a direction, were just they were just savage. And they would just go into the world, ruining nature and destroying a lot of things. And that's when Brave Chiron kind of got involved. He saw this happening. He saw his other half he feels guilty because, this is essentially his brother, his evil twin brother, who has now created these horrible things and destroying nature and bastardizing something he loved. So he got involved, and essentially the lost became the herd, and his influence, he got involved, and he got all these animals together, brought them to Galadriel, the forest of Galadriel, whatever it's called. That's it. And he changed. He made them good. He was just like, he gave them more guidance. Now he wasn't able to do that for everything. And we can go into a few examples that are still the lost, you could say, in the world of Panathor. But the majority, that's where the horde was found. It was like he taught them. That's why he's referred to as the father. And that's why you can get on the table the avatar of the father. He is that's the avatar of Brave Chiron, and he is the one just pointing them in the right direction. So the best way I always say when you say what is the herd, you got the forces of nature, which is all the plants based kind of rage and force, and you got the herd, which is all the animal based rage and hurt, you could say. So if someone's like, I want a nature based army, you'd be like, all right, do you like plants or animals more? If you like animals, go with the herd. If you like plants, go with the forces of nature. And that's the way you could see it. You could see it is the sword and shield thing. The shield is the forces of nature, and the sword is the herd. So the father, Brave Chiron, he influenced the herd, and now they basically followed the Green Mother. The Green Lady. I always call her the mother because she is referred to as the mother. Right. The Green Lady, and that is their god. Their god is the Green Lady. That they see Brave Chiron as the one that saved them, but they see the Green Lady as the one they worship and the one they protect, the reason why they keep on existing and keep on fighting. So that's the way you should see the herd. Is basically they're basically the orcs brothers, offcuts of the younger brothers, the older brothers that kind of got dismissed by the parents, the way you could see it. So the orc races and the ones from the herd, they're very closely related. They were created during the God War. And also another little tidbit is when Dark Chiron was seeing Brave Chiron kind of influencing these races to go against reason why he created them, released into the world, he started whispering to the kings of men to say, hey, these races are an abomination. They're evil. They're like the men. He basically went around manipulating all the humans and all the noble races against them as another weapon, because a lot of infighting can help. So instead of the herd being a full ally to the Shining Ones, none of the humans, even dwarves, didn't want to interact with them at all. So it wasn't really another advantage during the God War. It was just another thing that they couldn't use as much as they wanted to do, like the orcs or the goblins. Does that make all sense, Mark? I kind of rambled a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was good. The other thing, like when you read The Beast Within, they know that they're kind of related to the orcs.
Yeah.
They know it. So they've got their version of, what they do hanging out in the woods and everything, but they know that the orcs are like their worst part of them.
Yeah, they know there is a connection there.
They know there's a connection there.
Yeah, it's like someone knowing that they're really ugly, but they're still wanting to be out of society, be part of the world, but they keep on getting shunned because of what they look like, which they shouldn't. I mean, they have good intentions. They are trying to protect it, And so that's why the herd is. And now I would say the herd are more mutations of nature rather than from nature. I think that's another thing as well. Like, they're still trying to figure out their place in the world. They haven't existed as long as humans, owls, or dwarfs. They don't really have like an ancestral home or anything like that. They are just like creations that have been thrown into the world, and they're trying to figure out what their purpose is. And at the moment, their purpose is to protect nature and be that additional weapon the forces of nature have. So that's why I think the herd is such a wicked addition to Panathor, because it's not passive. It's not the forces of nature. They're not passive. They will run out and fight if they have to. And we see that in that short story. And that short story, I think, is very underrated. I think it's a really cool story. And I hope to see more of that, of nature. And when we're talking about nature, it's not the force of nature. We're talking about the herd just coming out and just showing their full strength. And that's why I'm really excited. Now, there's not a lot of lore outside of that. But I think that's one of the massive appeals of the herd, is just being that weapon.
Oh, yeah. And during that short story, they mentioned that, a lot of it's with the longhorns and the hunters and things like that. But, they also mention how the centaurs are mixed in there, and the lichens. And, they mention how they're different than the ones. And they mention Ophidia, which is very interesting, too.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, they have been around for 1,000 since the God War. And the God War took place, it basically started at year 0. And now it's year 3,866 or something like that. So they've been around for a while. And we're talking about multiple generations that have been here. Now, the herd is not just about fawns and satyrs. There's also Flexhoof, which is a centaur, who is actually plays a big part in the Edge of the Abyss. More forces of nature, but kind of the centaurs are definitely part of the herd. You can all see them as just. It's kind of, I would see the herd as, I always like to make real life comparisons when I'm talking about factions. I see the herd as like the Commonwealth of, like, you've got Australia, you've got Canada, you've got New Zealand and all that, and they all do their own thing. But if something bad happened, they all would come together and fight for a cause. So we saw that in World War II and One, and a lot of other wars that happen. Just I see them as more of a commonwealth of all these different species that are developing their own culture and their own way of life, and they just come together and be like a really huge fighting force. And I think from a cosmetic point of view, they will look amazing with the Mantic touch on the table. And I think it's really missing. I think that range, and that's why I think it will be very different from Warhammer, is that Beastmen are very chaos inspired, you could say, because they are influenced by chaos. But here we're not talking about chaos. We are just talking about people, races that love nature, that come from nature, but are beasts as well, like minotaurs and centaurs, and you can really do something special with them. So that's what I'm looking forward to, if they ever get to that point. And I think they've been in place since second edition, and the lore has changed with second edition versus third edition. It's mainly just that relationship they have with Chiron and how that all went down. But we definitely, that's one of those the factions that the door is open for something interesting to happen with them.
Well, that's why I was really hoping they'd be the third army, because there's so much potential there. And you're right, they're totally different than Beastmen. It's not all about that. I mean, if you read the short story, the reason why they're not all grouped together is because they eat all the food. They can't support everybody being in one place, so everybody's dispersed. But, when it comes together, they mention harpies floating around and centaurs and, all the different coalitions coming together, like you said, kind of like the Commonwealth. You get together for the big fight, and other than that, you scatter around, you do your thing, and, you come together when there's a problem. And like you said, I like the one part of the story where, they're talking about when the chieftains are all getting together, and Dragar mentions that, these two chieftains have been fighting, and they were fighting over a woman, basically. You mentioned the love triangle in there. And, now all of a sudden they're, taking oaths like brothers. It's like everything just falls to the side, and it's like, okay, it's on. We got to do this. So
correct, and that's very. I think that's very unique in the Panathor world. You don't really get that a lot of. I mean, I guess even dwarfs. I mean, like when the free dwarfs got kicked out, the Imperial dwarfs didn't really have that kinship with them. They're like, all right, you guys can stay with us, but we don't really like it. But the herd is a little bit different. It's like more of like we're all from the same pot. Let's all just work together because we've only mentioned a few here. So I'm going to run through all the races that are in the herd. So we've got Centaur, we've got Satyr, we've got Minotaur, we've got Fawns, we've got Harpies, we've got Owlbears, we've got Lycans, we've got Elementals, and we've got Glade Walkers as well. So we've got a lot. And so there's so much, and you got Broxums, I think they're called. What are they called? There was another one that they're no longer a unit in 3rd edition. Brutox. There was something called a Brutox, which was quite interesting. You have Chimeras as well, Scorch Wings. I'm trying to mention the ones that aren't borrowed from Forces of Nature. And and they're all chieftains. You got all that. They kind of work on a chief structure, a more tribal kind of structure. So, yeah, they're just such an interesting, underused race. And they're kind of got a very sad origin, a very sad story. And I think they are looking for their place in the world, and they could find it if they ever get the chance to, really. That would be awesome.
Yeah, one of the things is, they seem to be very focused in Gala here. I don't know if, there's a lot of forests in Panathor. So
yeah, I mean that's where Brave Chiron basically hid them during the God War, and that's why they're always there, because that's where you could say the base of operations for the Green Lady is in that forest, and pretty much that forest is theirs. So you got the forces of nature, you got the herd kind of working together. Just that's their sanctuary. So I don't think they could. I mean, they could always leave and establish their own, towns or cities. There's nothing to indicate that they have yet. But also, as I said, they get shamed by humans. That fear is still there. That fear for dwarfs is still there, and they are around a lot of infant human nations as well. So the successor kingdoms and all that. So all that is still quite, there, keeping them kind of isolated and that territory. So I think it's more of a case of like they just haven't been able to venture out, but they do have the ability to. So I hope they do. I hope we see the herd become something bigger and something more interesting. Maybe they establish their own, town or city. That'd be quite interesting to see if they go down that route.
Yeah. Well, it would be interesting too for them to, orcs are everywhere. So, maybe the herd starts expanding out of Gala here. There's a lot of forests in Panathor,
Correct, yeah.
And maybe their thing is that they're trying to cut down the orc, number of orcs in the world. They want to get rid of their, the kind of the evil brother kind of thing, there's a lot of story arcs you could go with on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take in mind also that when the Riftforged orcs kind of arrived, they kind of savaged everything. And the herd don't have a really good relationship with orcs in general. So there is potential that during that time, and I'm talking about the Storm of the Shires kind of time, when we only know about what happened between halflings and Riftforged orcs. The Riftforged orcs went everywhere. They went, through Royana, they went through the kingdoms of men, they went up north, down south, everywhere. What's stopping maybe one of the kingdoms of men reaching out to the herd and go, hey, could we give you this plot of land if you help defend our area? So you could see maybe a herd and kingdoms of men come together as a nation. Could we see a herd kingdoms of men society developing somewhere in the world? Because there's so many nations of men that we don't know too much about. We've seen glimpses of them. We've seen Valencia as one. There's so many opportunities for something like that to occur. And remember, that could have happened years ago, or it could have happened during the Edge of the Abyss. So we could be seeing societies like that crop up. So It's not to say they are a neutral faction. They have good intentions. Their goal is to protect nature. So they're not going to see a human and kill them straight away unless there's a reason to. So there is so many different angles, especially elves. I think elves would be a good angle to go on. What could happen? I mean, I want to talk about the herd because there's not a lot to talk about the herd because there's so much there, and it's so exciting.
Yeah, I believe that the Beast Within too mentioned that there's members of the group that are basically humans that they've kind of taken in, that maybe have just
centaurs. That's basically what they are. They're a merging of a horse from an experiment of a horse and a human. That actually kind of leads to some of the questions that we actually had. So from people who reached out. So if you do want to be involved in these chats, join the Mantic Universe podcast Facebook group, or leave a comment on any of our YouTube videos at all of a question, or send an email to kingsofwarwiki@gmail.com, and then we can involve you in this. So Zach. He runs the Mantalore podcast. He actually asked, how do they react with the Order of the Green Lady? So Mark, we'll start with you. It's only me and you. How would you think the herd would react with the Order of the Green Lady?
Well, I would probably think that they would work together kind of in a come together kind of way, because again, they're Galahir. You know what I mean? That's kind of where the focus is. So they're both kind of doing the same thing, so to speak. So between forces of nature, Galahir, herd Galahir, forces of nature, Galahir, it's
the Green Lady is the big one there. Yeah,
she's the rallying point.
Yeah, she's the connected tissue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that they would work together fairly well. How much contact do they have? We don't know because there's not a whole lot of story behind it. But
yeah, definitely. And because it's rather fresh. The Order of the Green Lady is a rather fresh kind of faction because it came about after the Edge of the Abyss occurred. The results of the Edge of the Abyss and the Brotherhood being broken up. There has always been talk with 4th edition coming up of whether we'll see less factions. And there is a bit of a fear that herd would be one of the ones that be left off. One of the potentials workaround is that maybe they merge, as we just talked about humans and the herd getting together. How about Order of the Herd, where the Order of the Green Lady and the herd combine together? And so, it would be disappointing to lose them as individual factions, but their synergy there is already pretty clear. They both honor the same person. They're both trying to achieve the same thing, and technically they are both neutral factions. What's stopping those two from merging together and having a little bit more, so the herd becomes less sporadic and all over the show of different tribes, that the Order of the Green Lady becomes the Order of the Herd, and they're a little bit more of a society kind of structured kind of thing of protecting the green. That's my feelings on it. That's how I would think that would go if they really started to interact.
Yeah, I always see the herd more merging with, because they're a sublist of the forces of nature. You get your plants and animals together. I think that's the nature. I like to think of the Order of the Green Lady as kind of like her personal defense force. Kind of like the elite special forces of the Green Lady. So they're the protectors of her more in particular than I think the forest. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, I see that. I see the Order of the Green Lady being more fanatics than anything else. I see the forces of nature being more defensive rather than the herd. The herd, I don't want the forces of nature and herd to merge. I feel like they need to be separate because the herd feel like they're the genetic engineered bastards of the forces of nature. They're not part of nature. They were created from nature in a very evil way, and now it's something created out of evil, of them trying to find their place and finding a purpose and protecting it. And I think that's actually a really cool story of if that continues between the horde and forces of nature. And I think there's so much potential for that, for them to try to figure out their place in the world.
There's a coming of age story there too, maybe a little redemption involved too. They know that, they're kind of related to the orcs, and they know the orcs are bad. So, they don't like them, so they like to get rid of them. And, maybe that's like a smear on their reputation, so to speak, or something like that. So, I could see them traveling around Panathor, getting out of Galahir and, just kind of like a little questing thing. I think there's a lot of potential there. Like you said, working with the humans, and it's like, hey, we got a problem here in the woods. And then all of a sudden you got some herd over here, and that, it all kind of goes, but they're all tied to the Green Lady. She's going to have to get maybe a little more powerful so she can connect all of them around Panathor.
The Green Lady is a Celestian and a Shining One and Wiki One all merged together. She's quite powerful. And as we learned in the recent Clash of Kings, she is working with Brave Chiron still pretty closely. So she's got a lot of power there. It'd be interesting if they do get pushed out of the forest. Maybe the herd becomes less of one big entity, but more like maybe three or four different herds. They're still referred to as the herd, and they've kind of just now spreading out a little bit. So, and all four of them, each one of them has its own name or something for that of what that herd is. And now, like from a canon point of view, there's like four different traveling herds around Panathor. That would be interesting. Again, we're not writing out. That's why I don't hope it becomes a faction they get rid of. I think it should be a faction they should explore more. So just to go on to another question from Zach, because Zach actually asked quite a lot of questions here. So his question was, can the half-breeds communicate with the full beasts, like centaurs talking to Gur panthers, etc.? I personally don't think they can. I think they're more they are human mixed with horse, kind of bastard, kind of not bastard. I shouldn't stop using that word, but hybrids kind of creatures that they don't have any abilities to talk to other animals. They're on their own species, their own race. So that's my interpretation. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I can go with that. One of the interesting things too, and I keep going back to the beast within. They can understand Orc to a certain extent. When Dragar goes and he's scouting out the big Orc force that's coming down to attack, he goes up there and he's doing his scouting routine. He can, put together what the Orc Crudger's, saying, and stuff like that. So that's very interesting, because I was wondering, when I'm reading the story, it's like, oh, he's crawling up there, so, they're speaking Orc. What's he going to get out of this? But there's another hint at the connection between the two. You know what I mean? The language is similar, like Spanish and Portuguese or something, They can, Italian, you can get some of what is going on there. You can understand, most of it, so to speak.
Yeah. So. And it really kind of shows the potential in the Panathor lore of, like, how orcs and humans have always been, the main two that are always conflicting. And Panathor, though, that's kind of turned on its head a little bit. It's not really the orcs versus humans. It's more orcs versus, the herd. I mean, the herd are kind of like the opposite of orc, and they're trying everything to fight back on them, similar to how the humans, because orcs are encouraging on the herd's land, and the herd are fighting back. I can see that rivalry really developing and becoming bigger. So really, I want to see more of those stories. That'd be really cool. So yeah, I do stress to people, read The Beast Within. That's a really good story, even though it's like 10 years old, and there's some canon issues with it. It's still good.
Yeah, it's not that long either, but it's got some good stuff in it, particularly if you're interested in the herd. And you can become interested in the herd in less than a couple hours by reading the story. But the other interesting thing in that story, too, is that the orcs and the goblins are working together, and they, so we really don't have orcs and goblins mixed together in Kings of War, except maybe if they're using allies or so. But I found that an interesting part of the story, too. So the goblins are they're not exactly, buddies with the herd as well. So you've kind of got the herd against two, so to speak.
Exactly. And I do hope they continue not having goblins and orcs working together in Panathor. I feel like after reading The Ascent of the Goblin King, keeping them apart is the smarter option. I want to see these two races become their own thing. They are new races to this world, They are relatively new, and I'll love to see them evolve into their own thing of not just being orcs and goblins. I want them to be goblins And then there's also orcs and how they develop their own cultures and societies and so forth. It'd be interesting to see where that goes.
I'd like to see the goblins kick a little orc butt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's like they've got the war
machines
machines and things like that, because they talk about those in the story, and it's like, well, you can turn those on the old orcs. So, I'd like to keep them separate as well.
You know what I would love to see a story of? Rift-forged orcs versus orcs and goblins. So orcs and goblins have teamed up for one reason or another. Maybe they're trying to establish their own territory, and then rift-forged orcs coming along trying to get them back in line, because the wicked ones are just like, oi, these guys have gone rogue. Can you just bring them back into the fold? And I would love to see a story around that. I think it would be a really interesting one.
Or a fun story would be the Riftforged orcs are going to go maybe try to absorb the regular orcs or something like that. You talk about eliminating armies. I don't want to see that. Yeah. But anyways, and then the goblins jump in and they see the opportunity and try to take one of the other two out. You know what I mean? So like unexpectedly and not as part of the overall plan, but just for them, that's what the way they want to see the world. And so they join one side or the other, or hamstring both while they're both weak. You know what I mean?
That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I like you said, I don't want to see them teamed up together in your typical Warhammer kind of, or, your usual orc and goblin type of trope. It would be nice to have them be a little separate, because, they even mention in the Beast Within too, when they're making that initial deal with the war machines and stuff, that the goblin, has his own kind of thoughts and things like that, like he's got something underhanded going on. So, but,
Hey everybody, this is Mike Rossi, Winged Hussar's second best dwarf author, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
And after you read Ascent of the Goblin King, you're right. It's like the goblins are their own thing. So
and then they're becoming like, they're not just underground, they're above ground. There's so many. I mean,
there's different flavors. There's
like underminers.
Yeah, right.
Underminers
and everything else. Yeah. So I think they should stay separate.
Yeah, agreed. And we've seen the Riftforged orcs absorb the orcs, and that was part of their, some of the lore indicated that was happening. So I think the Riftforged orcs will absorb orcs because they see them as inferior, more kind of like just take us. So yeah, anyway, we're getting off a little bit off track, but that'll be a wicked story. Now, also Zach asked a question, and you may know the answer because you're more of a table person. What is a beast of nature? So there is a unit called Beast of Nature, but it's a bit vague of what that actually is in terms of its description and so forth. It's actually in the forces of nature, but it can be used in the herd. So it says, is there a canon description, or is it a title that can be given to various biomorphs? Now, I did a bit of research and I found an actual description of what a beast of nature is in second edition. But before we do that, Mark, what's your interpretation of what a beast of nature is?
Well, for me, I'm a little tainted because they have that model in the welcome kit on the vault. And it's kind of like, I don't know why they designed this model, but it's kind of like a plant that, and Mike Carter took it, and he uses that as his beast of nature. And I've played that army several times at Origin. So for me, that is my beast of nature, is that model, because I've used it as a representation of it several times.
Which one is it? So, which one? The welcome pack. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, if you look in the welcome pack, there's like a big plant that kind of looks like a carnivorous tulip or something.
Yes.
Yeah, you see that?
It's at the bottom left for anyone that just wants to look it up themselves. So if you go to the welcome pack, I'll put it. We might put in the link below, but it's on the bottom left-hand side. Yeah, it looks like just a plant. It's like what's that movie where it's that talking plant?
Right. I'm struggling to figure out what it is, but yeah. There's that movie with that. And there's always cartoons with the talking plant that's carnivorous with the fangs and all that.
Oh, Little Shop of Horrors.
There you go.
Yeah.
And this is a big one. And so for me, that's the beast of nature.
Okay. So. That's a good accurate. So I'm going to read out what second edition said. The origins of these monstrosities is known only to the Druid elders, though they are rumored to have been created during a violent episode of the Lady's Wicked One aspect. Now, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because the Green Lady never had a Wicked One and a light side. The Green Lady, so Katrina, she merged with the Dark Liana and Light Liana to become the Green Lady. So whether they're referring to Dark Liana, like Dark Liana had a thing, had a freak out and then created these things, not quite sure. But again, it could be reconned, could be changed from then. It continues saying, terrifying to behold, they combine the most formidable traits of the Chimera, Sphinx, Manticore, and other monsters besides forming a patchwork avatar of nature's wrath. So I think it's less about that's a good representation of the plant, but I think the lore, if we're going to go straight off the lore to create it, it looks like it's just another beast that has just been merged and mushed with others. So I don't know what a Chimera, Sphinx, Manticore combined would look like, but that's what the lore says.
Well, that's a modeling opportunity. Yeah, that's a modeling opportunity. And like you said, plants and animals. So, we're using the plant, like I said, we're using that model as a beast of nature because we don't have any. Yeah. For forces of nature, yeah. So, but for the herd, you would get that combination of all the critters together, and that would be a very interesting modeling challenge. There's some hobby in there. To put something together.
If anyone has an idea of putting it together, flick us an image of it. I think that would look amazing. We don't have the talent. I don't have the talent. I don't know if Mark has the talent, but I definitely don't have the talent to do that. But if you come up with something that does that, show us, because that would be really cool.
Absolutely.
Now I'm going to go on with Zach. Now, there's going to be questions for you, because I won't have an answer for it.
All right, I got my buzzer ready.
Yeah. Why do you think they aren't played very often? The herd, that is.
Boy. Probably because they don't have models is number one. I also don't think that the Beasts of Chaos were a very popular army, and the models are harder to get a hold of. So I think that's the main reason. But for me, I see herd armies. Chris Kapsner had a beautiful herd army, and that I saw at Lone Wolf and stuff like that. So for me, I don't think of it as an army that's not played very often.
I think you make a good example. There's no really good examples of we don't have the models for them. So whenever people think of it, they're going to refer it to Beastmen or the Warhammer ones. We don't have a lot of good Mantic models of them, so people can't sell it, as in sell the idea of them. I think I don't know what the rules are like. I don't want to go that meta. I want to go purely on lore. I think the reason is because no one's showing them how cool they could be. And I mean, we have to think of a dirty casual. I mean, people who are involved in the hobby are going to see the examples like you did there. But if someone's looking from the outside, looking to get to the hobby, and they hear about the herd, they've got really nothing to really go on other than, just happenstance if they come across it. So they just haven't been shown how cool they are.
Yeah, well, I mean, I also think the sub-factions, I mean, if you take a look at the theme armies, you got Sylvankin and you got the herd and, free dwarfs. And I don't know, they just kind of seem like something's a little off. I'd rather have them be their own thing as opposed to just being like a faction, of a major list. When I look it up in the rule book, I see what the options are. I don't think about the master list at all. I'm just looking at the units that are in that particular army, and they're, a little bit thinner, in choices. But to me, that's the army. All the other extra stuff you can pick up from the master list, I kind of ignore that. And when I'm trying to conceptualize an army or something like that, and then when I go to put it together on the companion, it's like, wow, where'd all these units come from? So because I'm not thinking of it that way.
Yeah, they need to flesh them out. They need to give them the complete faction treatment rather than half it. What's like the Twilight Kin, I think, is one of them that they kind of started having that as a sub-faction, and then it now feels like they've got a fully fleshed out list. And I think that's the same with the herd. They need that fully fleshed out list. They need to stop borrowing from the force of nature, and they're just looking for that coat of paintland and give them more of a reason and to be their own thing. So yeah, I think you're 100% right.
Well, people think that they can eliminate the herd because they're a sub-faction. Any of the sub-factions you can say you can eliminate because...
You can eliminate any faction. Let's be honest. You could get rid of any faction if you really want to. You could get rid of Basileans if you really wanted to. And it all comes to like, what do we want out of the game? Do we want a game that lets everybody be competitive and pick the army of their dreams? Yes, that's ultimately what we want. We don't want a restrictive game like where fantasy battles kind of got into, is that it didn't really give you everything to be competitive. It was too metagaming. But here with Kings of War, there's so many ways that you can stay competitive and build a really cool army of what you want, rather than going, I want the best army, so I'm just going to go with dwarfs, or I want the best army, so I'm just going to go with Twilight King, even though I really want a halfling army, or I want an army based off beasts. So I think that's Mantic need to keep that. Because that is one of the best tools that they have, is being able to create the army of your dreams.
I agree. I don't want to see armies eliminated. I'll still have my flag staked at the top of that hill. So
yeah, if they created it,
where's it going to go? You've already put them into Panther. You're going to retcon everything? No. I mean, I guess you can grow it up and have the Riftforged suck up the orcs, but the orcs. We've been talking about in this entire show. They're kind of like the foil to and related to the herd. So why not lean into that and make something out of that? There's some good lore there. There's good reasons for them to fight on the tabletop. Redo the orc models and do the herd and then put out a 2-player starter set. I think that would be great. And you could call it the Beast Within. That would be a great title for it.
Include those characters in it. I mean, you could even include that scenario of the orcs versus the herd, and you could essentially have that story played out in one of that 2-player set. And to be honest, if you get rid of Riftforged orcs, or if you merge the orcs with Riftforged orcs, you might as well do that with the elves too. Like, just merge Sylvan King and the elves together. I mean, if you start doing that, you just eliminate what makes things unique in Panathor. So anyway, we're going to go on a rant if we're not careful there. So we'll continue with the questions.
Absolutely. I could go a half hour on that. All right,
exactly.
Let's move on.
And I'm sure we'll have more episodes to rant about that.
Absolutely.
We eventually we'll do an orc episode. So what, in your opinion, could be tweaked to make them more attractive? I think we just covered that. I think we covered just showing them how cool they can be, models, just incorporate them more into the game so they're not just another piece and they're actually a part of the whole puzzle. Another one is, what are some Panathor canon events where the herd has showed up? And the easy, I think we mentioned both of them, Edge of the Abyss and God War. They were key factors in those events, God War especially, because essentially it's their origin story. Outside of that, not many at all, but they don't need to be. I mean, as I said, they protected the forest. If you're not attacking the forest, they've got no reason to leave it. So there's not much there. And that's all the questions from Zach there.
Right.
And I have one more question, which will be interesting because we've literally just talked about them. John Paul Fuller Jackson said, how would they interact with the Riftforged orcs? I wonder if they'll be able to get Riftforged orcs to turn against Garkin and become their own race. I don't think they could. I think Riftforged orcs are so loyal that, because keep in mind, before they were released in Panathor, they spent decades or even centuries in the Abyss becoming this refined fighting force for the Wicked Ones. And when they all got released, they savaged everything. They're still pretty loyal, as we can see in Clash of Kings 2025. I think the herd have a better chance of swaying the goblins or the orcs. Not Riftforged orcs, just the orcs, into going against Garkin than Riftforged orcs. That's my opinion.
Yeah, why would they go against Garkin? I don't,
No, I can't see any reason. I think Riftforged orcs are as evil as an orc as you can get. I think they're going to be right. I don't think there's any swaying them. Their loyalties will always be the Wicked Ones.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're the elite strike force of that.
Correct.
And we've got a couple of armies that are like that, like the Herd. We talked about
Yeah.
them being a little more. And then, of course, Order of the Green Lady, the protective force, the elite troopers of that. So you've got some elite armies. And so to me, they're an elite army. And I've got an ambush force of them. And that's the way I think about them. They got the Hell Strikers and, stuff like that. And so they're pretty cool. I like them as an army, but I like them as a separate army.
I like them as part of lore. Yeah, I like them being different. I see them as different orcs and Reforged orcs. I see them as two different things. I think the orcs are going to be a very thing that's going to become their own thing. They're going to evolve. You could even have some sub-factions against the Wicked Ones as well. I can see that happening with them because they are the first experiments. They're the first ones off the rack. Reforged orcs, no, they're always going to be evil. They're always going to be the go-to force of the Wicked Ones, or Garkins specifically. So, yeah. And the last question from Chris Thomas again, is Amber Heard related to the Herd? So Amber Heard was the ex-wife of Johnny Depp, and they had a big court case. Based off what I found out from the court case, there is a potential she could be part of the Herd, but probably more of the lost one side of things rather than on the good side. But we won't go dive more into that. It's just a joking one to said. And yeah, I guess is there anything else you want to talk about the Herd? I've got one last thing to sign off the show with. But
no, go for it.
Else? Okay, so one of the big things about the Herd that you kind of have to understand is that there's kind of two types. So you got the lost ones, and then you've got the Herd. So the Herd are the ones that are kind of been saved by Brave Chiron, and the ones that are now following the Green Lady. The lost ones are the ones that essentially haven't been given that good influence and turned them. You know how we talked about how dwarfs are kind of have that kind of good and bad kind of side of things. The Herd are kind of the same way as well. So in Panathor, there's actually 4 different kinds of werewolf, which I'm not sure a lot of people know. There's 4 different kinds. You got the Lycans, you got the Lycan alphas, you got the Lycanus, and then you got the werewolves. Now, so the Lycans and the Lycan alphas are essentially the Herd side of it. They're the ones that were made into werewolves, but instead of being savage, they were turned. Brave Chiron kind of saved them. Now, the Lycanus and the werewolves are the lost ones, the ones that are still messed up. They're the ones that work for the undead. They're the ones that are still kind of raging and more wicked ones kind of inspired and don't just have any morality. So the difference between the werewolves and the Lycanus is more of the like a senior werewolf that's just more savage, more bestial, more muscular, and there's kind of just really just savage and gone insane. The werewolves are the kind of like you see the models of like more of the human body and just the werewolf head. So they're the ones you could say those the raw experience before they evolve into a Lycanus. You could even say they're young. I don't know how the breeding patterns work. Obviously, they've been around for generations, so there's probably a breeding kind of thing how it works. So they kind of get born with a more human body, wolf head, and they eventually evolve into a Lycanus. But a Lycan and a Lycan alpha is kind of like the same kind of model. So a Lycans are the younger form of a werewolf that's good, and then they eventually evolve into a Lycan's alpha, which is like a Lycanus, so a little bit older. So that is something that I think is very unique to Panathor as well, of different types of werewolf. And it took me a little while to figure this out and like work out how that was actually work, because you see werewolves all the time in multiple different armies. You're like, but if they're undead, how are they also in like the Herd? I think they're in the Herd currently, or in other armies, and you're like, that doesn't really make sense. Why would something could be undead? And a good example of how a werewolf could turn is that there is a character called Moonfang. Moonfang can be selected as a hero unit. So Moonfang was a Lycanus, so an evil senior werewolf, and eventually he was turned with the forces of good, or force of good for the Herd, and just that influence of the Shining Ones to become a Lycan Alpha. So that's a good example of, like, again, showing that, if we go back to that dwarf example, the line between good and bad is all depending on like what comes out they are cosmetically influenced when the good or the bad come out, but it also shows you how easy that can happen in this world of like you could be an abyssal dwarf, but you can be saved. Same with a werewolf as well, and there's probably other species out there that line of which side they're on all comes down to which Celestian body is influencing them. So I just thought that was interesting. I thought interesting too.
Oh, it is, and it's another good reason to keep all your factions around too. So
yeah,
and for Mantic on a model standpoint, it's good because you can use the werewolves models for the undead army, or you could use them for the herd army, or
one thing I would think is a little bit troublesome at Mantic is with their modelers, they probably get a little bit bored sometimes of doing the same thing over and over again. So I mean, I would love that they hopefully they get an opportunity of like someone goes, hey, this is our catalog of things we don't have. How about a werewolf? We need to jazz the werewolves up, but we've got these two different kinds of werewolves. We've got werewolves and we've got lycans, so a good and bad one. What's your interpretation of what a bad werewolf or evil werewolf looks like, and what a good one looks like? And then that adds to the model range. That's something that the modelers can like flex, because I mean I'm sure they have to model things they don't really care about. I mean it probably happens all the time. It's a job at the end of the day. I do hope they get those opportunities to explore things like, I really like dwarfs. I mean, what's a really cool project of our dwarfs I could tackle, and just being throwing these kind of things. And I think one of them could be werewolves. So like, what's my interpretation? What would be a Kings of War interpretation of the same creature, but in two different kind of mindsets? So there's so much opportunity there of really showing a distinct, and ultimately, if you're like, I like the evil one better for my herd army anyway, you could still get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can still use that same model for your herd as faction. But yeah, as we said, there's so much awesome potential of like little minor differences making a huge difference on the table.
Right. Well, I mean, if you think about it too, they're neutral, so they can go bad. So
yeah.
Or they could go
but
good.
they could become the Lost. You could have a Lost inspired the herd faction. So what does that look like? What does the herd, using the herd kind of as a basis, what if they are still with the wicked ones or the Lost, or they're a little bit more, they're less collective, they're less of an structured army or force, they're more kind of like wild. Well, that would be an interesting take.
Oh, there you go. See, so the herd could become a master list, and then a sub faction there could be
the Lost. Yeah.
The Lost. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, that would be, an interesting thing, and then that would give them their flavor, and then we could have another army.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be just a color palette kind of deal.
Yeah,
like, or you could get special command dice. So the only difference between the Lost and the herd is just the command dice rule. So it could be something like that.
Well, it would be modeling opportunity too. So, but
exactly.
What do we keep hearing right now? Flavor.
Exactly.
Yeah, flavor.
Exactly.
It's like, to me, that's what all the armies give you is flavor.
Yeah,
so.
Unique flavor as well. So yeah, that's it for the herd. I think that's kind of all long said. Now, as part of what we did last time, also competition for a book. So we're going to be giving away the Edge of the Abyss book, book. So we're going to do things similar. So if you do want to enter the competition, you just need to post a comment on our YouTube channel. We don't really have a lot of them, so I do notice it. You could also send an email to kingsofwarwiki@gmail.com, or just post on our Facebook group, which is the Mantic Universe Podcast, and just reach out, just post, your answer to the question. Now, the question that I will pose, I don't know, did we work out the question that we were going to do, Mark? I think
we did not. So we were going to leave that to the show. So
all right. So how about this? How about the question I would pose is because we don't have any Mantic models for any unit for the herd whatsoever, whether it comes from the forces of nature or not. So I would say, what model would you want Mantic to make? So what unit, what model, what would you want them to make for the herd? And just post a comment, whether it's Moonfang itself, because Moonfang is that alpha. So like an alpha, or the Great Chieftain, or fawns, like a tribal warriors and tribal spear units that we could see fawns or satyrs or satyrs, sorry. What do you want to see from the Horde from Mantic to Mantic ties it, I guess. Just post that to us and we'll get the book out to you. If the winner gets the book out, hopefully not too many people reply. I'll see. If there's only 2 people,
hopefully everybody applies. And
just
to the podcast. Give us a prop.
I think it also helps us to understand who's listening to this. Like, are you guys actually enjoying us talking more deep lore instead of what we do in the normal MUP show is just kind of like touch on it. This is where we really get in the weeds with it. So if you like it, let us know. Enter the competition. It's a good way of letting us know you're listening to it. But ultimately, reach out to us if you've got any questions or want a suggestion of the next episode. Because actually, Mark, you can choose. What do you want to do next? You can be a faction.
Boy, I get to pick anything.
Anything.
Boy.
It can be anything. I mean, we talked about Celestians. So we've talked about Celestians. We talked about the Herd. We can keep talking about other factions or a particular element of anything really.
I have the big red book here. I am going to flick it. And whichever army comes out is what we're going to come up with. So
we'll do ASMR here. Here we go. There you go.
Oh, I did orcs.
Orcs. We'll do orcs. Oh, that's a good faction.
Orcs. Yeah. We'll follow up on more of this conversation. So
yeah, so we're going to go all the way back to the Mantic Journal. We'll talk about the
first edition.
Well, yeah, we'll go back first edition.
Yeah.
I got all the copies of the Mantic Journal in PDF. We can talk about the first ever Mantic hero. We can also talk about a few other creatures that weren't mentioned back then, and also one of the first named mounts, because I actually do have a Gore named mount that I've actually got listed here as one of the first named units in the game. So that would be interesting.
Oh, this is exciting. So there you go, Kyle Poole. This is your chance, even though you're more a goblin guy. So Eric Trowbridge, shout out to you. Get us some questions. So that'll be a little fun. But orcs actually is just a wild choice. I actually did flick that. That was not planned, folks. So, but
sure.
I think that's great.
I saw him. Don't worry. I saw him. We're on camera. I saw him. He did it. He flicked it. He didn't plan it. It's fine.
Yeah. So orcs are under siege. So I think that'll be great. We'll make our pitch on why they should stay. So
yes, exactly. And we'll make it clear what's the difference between orcs and Riftforge orcs. And I think we'll kind of establish why they're actually different. But I think we can get into the weeds of it. We can mention some of the sub races of orcs that not a lot of people talk about as well. So we're really getting it.
Yeah, this will be exciting.
Cool.
Yeah, right. I'm ready. All right. So next time, orcs, we'll get it together. So
yeah, send your questions in. It'll be fun.
All right. So anything else before we head out into the sunset there, Dave?
I think an hour and a half is fine. I've got to go play Minecraft with my niece, who I told her she just had to wait an hour. It's been an hour and a half now. So I'm going to go a little bit crazy playing Minecraft. I don't like Minecraft, but I'll be playing Minecraft.
Good. All right. Well, I'm going to see what's going on here in the old hacienda. And I'll mention real quick, we're working on plans for Origins coming up. And we'll see more as it becomes available. But very, very excited about that. We're planning early again this year. And so it's going to be exciting. So if you're going to be in the area for Columbus, Ohio in mid-June of 2025, come see us. Should be fun. We are going to do the How You Use It tournament on Saturday night. So if you want to come, that's always a good time.
And for the record, I still have not played a game of Kings of War. I will one day. But
there you go.
We'll do it one day.
All right. Well, actually we were talking about New Zealand a couple days ago. So I have some friends that moved down there. So. Which is very interesting. So if I ever come down to visit them, I'm going to track you down, Dave. So
we can actually play my armies that are behind me. I do have armies, right? I do have the models. I just never actually played them. And there's Riftforge orcs right there for you as well.
There you go. Perfect.
Cool.
Take care,
See
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.